Hey, I am Robin Wilson, and this is the Expat Diaries podcast. And today I'm really happy and excited. It's funny whenever you start talking to somebody and you don't know their story yet, and their story just keeps unfolding, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. This is so interesting. And so today I have Jenni Wolf with me, and I met Jenni through a Facebook group, and I got to speak with her and just kind of discuss like how did their journey to get to Costa Rica happen. And you guys are going to love this story because there's so many different layers to it, and there's so much information that I think everybody really wants to hear, like the questions that we all have. Jenni has already experienced all of them. So without further ado, Jenni Wolf, hello, welcome.
Hello.
I'm excited to talk to you. I know when I visited you, we talked about you and your husband Lowell were at the time before you came to Costa Rica, you were living in Vietnam. So tell me like a little bit about what took you there. Like I can't imagine like you're a young married couple and like your first experience is like now we're going to move to Vietnam. But tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, actually we got married and then we came to Costa Rica for 1 month to do our honeymoon. And then we went from Costa Rica to Vietnam to live there.
Wow.
So, yeah. And we went to Vietnam because my husband got a job there. He had a friend whose uncle owned a business, that a education consulting business that sent Vietnamese kids to American boarding schools.
Wow. That's interesting. That's so interesting right there. So you were in Vietnam for how long?
5 years.
Okay. And then, so a lot of people are probably familiar with who your father-in-law is. So then take me down the journey of how we went from Vietnam to Costa Rica.
Yeah. So we'd been living in Vietnam for 5 years. And in Vietnam, like I was teaching English as a second language. And that's where I got my Montessori teaching certificate.
Nice.
Which is a big part of the story in the future. But
It is.
Yeah. And I finished my training there, and me and my husband, after living there for 5 years, we were kind of like, oh, we're kind of tired of living here. We love Vietnam, but it's not really our home. So we wanted to look for something different. And my father-in-law is Jerry, and he owns a business called Get It Here, Jerry, here in Costa Rica. So it's like a freight forwarding business for shipping. And so a lot of people use his service for moving down to Costa Rica because he can ship containers, like shared containers, which helps to save some money because you're sharing the container instead of having a whole container.
Such a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, especially at that time, because he started the business, I think in maybe like 2013 or 2014, around there. I don't remember exactly, but there was like nothing. There wasn't really any way of getting things down here in an easy way. So that's why he decided to open that business. But it's also helpful, not just for moving down here, but if there's anything that you want for building, or even just things that you can't get in Costa Rica that you're maybe used to from the States, because it is from the US to Costa Rica.
All right. So I know I'm going to talk to him soon because I know the places that we're getting ready to build on, there's no electricity there yet. So we're going to be going solar. And everybody that I've spoken to is like 100% either get your solar stuff in the US or get it in Panama, because it's just so pricey here that you'll want to get everything and then bring it down. So I'll be talking to him about that then.
Yeah, for sure.
So he decided he got so busy.
Yeah,
he needed help.
Yeah, he needed help. And we were tired of living in Vietnam. So then he asked my husband, Lowell, would you like to come down here to help me expand the business? And so Lowell and I talked about it, and we thought it'd be a really good idea. And so
Are
we
the
decided to
climates
come
about
down here.
are the climates about the same?
Yes, they are. Though we were living in Hanoi, which technically which is in the northern part of Vietnam.
Mhm.
And so technically there are 4 seasons there, though it's very humid in Vietnam. And also like the winter is very mild winter. Like it doesn't snow. And the winter I feel like is like 1 month. And then I feel like summer there is like 6 months. So
Understood.
yeah, but they still have like a like big monsoon season and everything.
So
And
I think you had a leg up on coming down that a lot of people don't have because Jerry, right? Like, so getting your stuff there and getting stuff moved was probably, I mean, I don't know about from Vietnam, but from anything from coming from the States. Because I know a lot of people discuss the logistics, and I have a gentleman I talked to yesterday, and he's like, I think I got really ripped off whenever I had my stuff shipped in here. The guy just like gave me a blanket price, didn't want to know what was all in there, and just told me, okay, it's going to be $30,000 to get your container here. And I'm like, holy cow. So I think that some of those things you already had some insight as to that's an appropriate price. That's not an appropriate price. These things are realistic and those aren't. So that was helpful, I'm sure.
mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so what year did you guys get here?
So we moved here in 2016.
Okay. And whenever you moved to Vida?
Yes, we moved to Vida.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I know a lot of expats, the one I speak to, we talk probably like 80% of the expats that I talk to literally just come in and rent. Is that your guys' situation too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we rent. And we still rent, even though it's been like 7 years, but yeah.
You know, it's funny because I was telling somebody yesterday, I was a mortgage lender for decades in the States. And when the mortgage meltdown happened, like we had a ton of real estate, and it was just catastrophe, right? Like we had so much real estate that was now worth absolutely nothing. And now the house that I live in, the house that I have in the States, I have leased it for 13 years. I have no intention of buying it because I don't need to be tied down to a piece of real estate because my life is fluid. So it's like there's no sense in that, and it's just a home base. And I have a really great landlord who's never raised my rent in 13 years. So
wow, yeah.
I feel like I'm in one of those rent controlled New York cities, but
yeah.
So that's I 100% am on that same page with that. So you guys moved down in 2016, started helping Jerry, but then your path was different because you were really, really interested in teaching still, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when I first got there, then I had like a few months where I wasn't working at all, but I was because we moved down in July, and then the school year starts here in like January, February.
Okay.
And so, but I was talking with the owner of Escuela Verde, and so then I started teaching there. I was teaching the kindergarten class there.
Such a fun age.
Yeah, totally. I love that age. It's my favorite age.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're still like so like little and cute, but then they're also getting like they're pretty independent. So
well, and they're little sponges yet. They haven't formed opinions about adults yet. So
yeah.
I'm always like, they still like grown-ups. That's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So how long did you teach at Escuela Verde?
So I taught at Escuela Verde for 2 years.
Nice.
And then I got pregnant. And so I wanted to take a year off of teaching so I could be with my daughter. So, so I took after I got pregnant, then I took the year off. And during that year off, I had someone else that I met here. Her name's Courtney, and she does yoga teacher trainings, but she was a Montessori child, and she had 3 of her own kids. And so she wanted that Montessori education, and she knew that I was a Montessori teacher. And so then she asked me to be a teacher and at that school.
So for everybody who doesn't know what a Montessori school is like, can you kind of walk them through that?
Yeah. So Montessori education, it was founded by a woman named Maria Montessori, She was an Italian woman, and this was in the early 1900s. And it is a philosophy of education. And in this philosophy, it's different than traditional schools because first there's mixed age. So we do from age 3 to 6. That's the primary.
All together?
And they're all together. Yeah. So they do mixed age because a lot of the teaching philosophy is about modeling. That's a big component of it. So the teacher models, and then the older students model to the younger students. And then the younger students help the older students because the older students like reinforce their learning because they're like little teachers. And then also teaches them like things like patience and compassion and things like that.
I love it.
And then also one of the big things about Montessori education is that it is child-led. And so autonomy is a huge value in Montessori education. We value autonomy, independence, and responsibility, even at this young age of 3 to 6. And so the children get a lot of choice. And then the teacher is more like a guide. And so they're there to help the child make sure that they're like still staying on track, but it's more of a guidance than just like spitting out information and the child just having to
memorize
it.
Yeah. It's funny. There's a book by Napoleon Hill, and it's called Outwitting the Devil. And it was written in the 30s, in the 1930s. And I have to say 1930s now because we're coming up on that. I was written in the 1930s, and he was talking about it. It's a really kind of weird fable, this conversation that Napoleon Hill has with the devil, right? And so he's asking him his secrets behind, like, how do you get people? How do you get them to, to sin or to follow your ways or whatever. And one of the things he tells me, he says, I start with the children in the education system. He says they're never taught to be free thinkers. They are only taught to memorize the stuff that's in the curriculum. And he's like, as long as I don't have free thinkers, I can control anyone. And it was like, and to think that that was written in the 1930s when nobody spoke ill of the education system. It goes through several other tenets also as to, the things that we do to ourselves that make ourselves weak for. And it's just a fable, but it's just such an interesting concept that while I was listening to it several times, I'm like, this was written in 1930. Holy cow, this craziness that somebody was aware of it at that time and went, look, if they're free thinkers, if there's someone who can actually solve problems on their own or come up with questions even on their own, then I can't control them because they know how to use their own free will. And so I thought about that when you and I were talking the other day about the Montessori way. And then I went and did some more research myself. And I was like, it's so great to have that opportunity for them to be free thinkers and to come up with the things that they want to learn too.
Yeah, totally.
So I know we're going to talk about Montessori again a little bit later, but you kind of mentioned something and I want to dive in there. So I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, move to another country, healthcare, blah, 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 right? And so you said, oh, and so I got pregnant, we had a baby here. And so I want people to know, like, what was that like for you? Like, you're in a foreign country, it's not the healthcare that you're used to, and everybody has some very primitive idea of what I think that they believe that their healthcare will be like and why they won't move to another country because, America has the best healthcare in the world or whatever they want to believe. So tell me about your experience. So you and Lowell are expecting your first baby, and I'm sure you planned all of this out. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I got pregnant in June of 2018. And and of course we were super excited to find out that news. And that was our plan because we wanted to raise children here in Costa Rica because we think it's a great place to raise kids. And so that was also one of our reasons why we moved down to Costa Rica, because we thought it would be like a really great place for children, because Costa Ricans, like, they love children, and yeah, it's so family oriented. So that's something that I really love about living down here. And as far as like the medical side of the pregnancy, it was pretty straightforward, and we decided to go private. And I think that's one thing is because there is the public health system, but there's also private options available, and it's quite affordable. So I think that's important to know, because even with insurance, like in the States, I think you would probably end up paying more than doing private here in Costa Rica.
Probably. So you told me that your doctor, the hospital was in San Isidro. And so if anybody has been down to the Southern Zone and know the drive from Vida to San Isidro, the minute that Jenni told me that, I was just like, for reals? Because that drive on a good day with good road conditions is just a tiny bit sketch.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is a windy road, and yeah, definitely like that that like first doctor's appointment when you're in the like first trimester and having nausea, like going up there.
I can't imagine. I didn't even think about that part. I was just thinking about I'm in labor and now I have to get up this road that goes like this all the way. Oh my Lord.
I mean, the drive was not fun, and the drive did get old, especially towards the end when you have like a lot of checks and everything.
Right.
Then going up there was just like, oh, it's so tiring.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you make it, you're in your third trimester. Do you even consider like, I think we'll go ahead and stay here until the baby's born?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I wanted to stay in Uvita until I was going into labor. And even I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. But yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of people were definitely just like, "Oh, are you worried about the road?" But I don't know. I wasn't worried about the road, even though it's not a fun drive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't worried about it, and because when I went into labor, there was a bridge. They were doing construction on a bridge to get to San Isidro, and so then there was a half-hour detour. So normally it takes about an hour to get there, and then it took an hour and a half to get there. So, but luckily I went into labor at night. And when I called the doctor, which his name is Dr. Garcia, and he's a great doctor and highly recommend him. But so he had said, well, yeah, I think it's time that you should come up. And right now the bridge is open. You don't have to take the detour. So why don't you come up? And then if you're not actually in real labor, then you just here if you can, and then you can go home in the morning. And then, but if you are in real labor, then you can have the baby. And so, so I went up there, and yeah, so then it just took an hour to get up there. And he wanted to first go into his office before we went to the hospital, because one thing, the hospital was Las Americas, and they don't have an OB there all the time. And so he has to be there. So he had a policy that you have to be dilated to a 6 before you can go to the hospital. And so that is something that I will say, anybody that's thinking about having babies here, there are some a lot of policies and everything. So it's good to know what the policies are before.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily like align with how we do things in the States or in Canada or wherever. And so you're right, like knowing what all of that is so you're not caught off guard will probably be a good idea.
Yeah. And but when I got up there, even though I was having contractions that were like 3 minutes apart, I wasn't even dilated.
Oh my gosh.
I was just like, I was in shock. And it was like at midnight at this point. And so then we had to find a hotel. And we, the first 2 turned us away because they were full. And then it was the third hotel that they had room and accepted us in.
It's almost like if you follow, like, I was thinking whenever you told me this the first time too, and I was like, like there's no room at the inn.
Yeah.
The old Bible story, like there's no room at the inn. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you get into the hotel, your labor is progressing. Do you have to just keep going back to the doctor's office to get examined?
Yeah. So I had to keep about every 6 hours. I had to go back to the doctor's office to get checked, and I had a very long labor. Long story short, after I think I made the call at around like 37 hours or something like that, I had only dilated to a 2, and I was just so
You
exhausted.
had to be.
Yeah, I missed 2 nights of sleep
Oh,
and everything, and I was just so exhausted that I decided to go for a C-section. And so, yeah, I went in for the C-section, and yeah, everything was great. And even though Dr. Garcia does speak English, and there was one nurse there that spoke English, but the like anesthesiologist and everything, they spoke Spanish. But I did have that help because the nurse and the doctor, they spoke English.
nice.
So yeah, and also when I was pregnant, I learned a lot of medical terms in Spanish. That way, I could
Understand some?
understand. Yeah,
That sounds awesome. So then you delivered your first child, and what is her name?
and her name is Quinn.
Quinn.
And yeah, it's it took. I never changed my last name to my husband's last name, so it has
Me either.
both our names. Yeah.
All
And so
right.
that's also something, like if you do have a baby here, you have to use the father's name and the mother's last name. That is a requirement. Though I guess I know some people that they changed their name to their husband's name, but then they had to have like a double last name. But I think it's just like that on the Costa Rican birth certificate. But then on the U.S. birth certificate, it's just like one.
Normal. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Okay. So then how long did you stay in the hospital after your C-section before you and baby get to come home?
Yeah, so I did really well, and so they were like, "Oh, you can go home the next day." So I just got to go home the next morning. So, and I was fine, and actually I didn't have any pain medication, um, and I guess it's also not standard for here in Costa Rica that they usually don't give pain medicine after C-sections, but it sounds like in the States, a lot of women, I've heard stories that they had pain medication, but I didn't feel like I needed it. So
Okay.
yeah,
Good.
but I also known people that like had C-sections here, and if they needed the pain medicine, then the doctors would give it to them. But yeah.
So got a newborn now. So you went through, not only did you go through childbirth, but actually surgery also. And
Mhm.
now you've got a newborn back home in Uvita. And are there pediatricians? Do you have like a baby doctor down there, or did you have to come back up to San Isidro for your baby doctor?
I just use a family doctor down here in Uvita, and since I've never had anything like need to go to the doctor at all,
Nice.
but I have a family doctor and keep for whenever I've had like questions about like, because rashes are common down here, and so, or like skin conditions, I think is the humidity and everything. So sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, what is this?" And yeah,
Awesome.
so
Okay,
but,
so not only did you have one child in Costa Rica, you've had two. So you have two children
mhm.
now, and your second experience was a lot different than your first. And this, like, I just love this entire story because I'm like, I mean, as a parent, like I have 5 kids, and so as a parent, we like go back and think about what options you have or had, and did you make the right decision or not? And I love that. A lot of times if you've had a C-section, the doctor just wants to do a C-section again. Like in the States primarily, like they just I think it's easier for them. They can schedule it, the time frame, and it's like you've already gone through it, so go through it again. But you decided with your second one that you didn't want to have a C-section again. You wanted to deliver naturally, correct?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
tell me about all of that.
yeah. So yeah, after having my daughter, I well, I thought, and also I thought I was just gonna have like one child, but then I fell so in love and my heart just opened so much that I was like, oh my gosh, I want like 50 kids.
Right.
Well, of course, not really, but
it expands. It's like so
Yeah.
crazy. It just keeps expanding to give more love. And you're like, I didn't even know I was capable of loving this much.
Yeah. And so then I was like, oh, well, I definitely want another child. And, but I don't want to have another C-section. Because even though everything went well with the C-section, I just didn't want to go through that again. And so I wanted to go naturally. And so I talked to my OB and I said, is it possible? Do you think I could have a VBAC? And he said, of course you can. Like, and he was even so supportive of it. He was like, he told me, he's like, oh yeah, you could, I've supported women that have had 2 cesareans and then they went on to have a VBAC and also like with twins and
Wow.
yeah. And then he even supports breech birth and he does home births. And so he does home births from all the way down from San Vito to Capos. He does home births there. And he even said, he's like, and I think you would do better in a home birth. And so, and I had thought of the idea of home birth with my daughter, but then I was feeling kind of scared. I think that's pretty common for a first time mom because you don't know
anything.
You don't know anything. Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah. And so used to like hospital birth. And I had actually never even really heard of home birth until I got to Costa Rica. And actually a lot of women have home birth in Costa Rica. So yeah, after having my daughter, I looked into home birth. And I even know women here that have free birthed or had like unassisted births. And so after looking into that, I decided that I wanted that. And Dr. RC even supported that, nice. Which I think is kind of
unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. So, yeah. So
we're used to doctors that just want to control everything about everything that we do. And we know nothing. They know everything. And, this is so refreshing to hear this.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, I'm the type of person that likes to know a lot. So I researched a ton about free birth. And at first, my husband was totally supportive about home birth. But then when I told him that I wanted to do like a free birth, he was like, what? and I was like, well, like, don't worry. Like, I'm not expecting you to like be a doctor or anything. Like, I think that like, as long as this is understood, everything is going to go naturally and unfold the way it is. And if there is a problem, we can always call the doctor or we can always go down to a hospital. We can go up to Capos if we need.
Right.
Like if there's a true emergency. And so I looked up what those emergencies would be and what that looked like. So I knew if something like that appeared, then okay, then I need to call the doctor or I need to go to the hospital.
So one of the things I was thinking about was because you struggled to dilate last time. So then now is it your husband's job to make sure to check and make sure you're dilated to the point where it's time for you to start pushing?
No, actually, we did nothing. And actually in my research, I had found that a lot of times people that don't dilate, it's the checking that disturbs that dilation. So I purposely did not want to be checked.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I did, that's also one of the reasons why I wanted a free birth, because I wanted to not have like any of these other energies around me. And that way I wouldn't have to be put in this fear of like someone else, like anxious, like how far along is she? And I had to be very much like,
right.
Just not worry about that.
Tune with all of it. And then you would know like, this is the time.
Yeah. And definitely when it was time, I knew like my body just did it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So Yeah, and actually I had,
So your husband put on the catcher's mitt
yeah,
and went, "All right, bring her here."
yeah. So I was in the shower, and then I felt down, and I felt the now I know it's my son's head, and I was like, oh, something's like actually happening and everything. And so then I called my husband, and I was like, hey, you got to get come over here, you got to get ready to catch and everything. And he was like, okay. And it's so funny. He put his hands under there, and then like he looked, and then he was like, oh, there's actually a baby there, Jenni. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I told you.
That's why I called you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. And then so then my body just like did it. It was totally the fetal ejection reflex. And so, I mean, I guess it helped my baby help push a little bit, but it wasn't like any really conscious. It was just, I can liken
It
it
was
to like
kind of a
throwing up.
Montessori style, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It was a child-led birth.
it was.
I love that. I love that. So what is your son's name?
So my son's name is Finn.
Nice. Those are cool names.
Yeah, so Quinn and Finn, they rhyme.
And so that won't be a big deal right now, but when you're angry and they're running around the yard later and you're trying to get one of them to call, you'll go through both of them before you get the right one to answer you.
Yeah. Oh, that happens already. So
okay.
Yeah.
So we made it past that. We have healthy babies. Did you go to the doctor for a checkup afterwards? Like, did everything happen right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So afterwards, and this is also interesting about my son's birth is that when he came out, the cord ripped. And so when I saw that, I was just like, well, my husband noticed it first. He's like, oh, the cord is broken. And so I was like, oh, go get a string. And so he got my daughter's jump rope.
Oh my gosh.
So he tied it off.
Oh
and
my
then and so then I did call the doctor and ask him. He was like, oh yeah, just like make sure it's tied off. And so it wasn't that big of a deal. And then I also called a midwife who was a friend, and she said, oh yeah, you can burn it to make sure it's like cauterized and stuff. So that's what we did. But yeah, so everything went fine. And then the next morning, I called the doctor and asked if he could come over to my house. And so he came over to my house, and he just checked everything out, and he was like, yeah, everything looks good. So,
nice. And how big was your son?
He was about 7.5 pounds.
Nice, good size baby. And your daughter?
She was 8 pounds.
Wow. So are those two, you're just going to have two? Or we're just going to wait and see what unfolds? Or you're just going to have two? Nice. And so
the plan is two.
I think about your birth plan. I know that for women it's very personal, but it's like the husband just kind of gets drug along, like, this is what we're doing. And he's just like, okay, I love you enough I'm going to do this thing with you.
Yeah.
So was Lowell at any time like, holy crap, Jenni, could we just do it the normal way?
Well, no, I mean, I definitely think he had like some fears and everything, which I think is like completely normal. But he was always like, this is your birth. Like, this is, it's your body. It's your birth.
Nice.
So you're the boss. So
those are great stories, and they give a real good insight into what your options are if you're a younger woman moving down to Costa Rica, or what the medical stories are not probably like would have been made up and told to you by our traditional media and the stories that we like to sell. So I love that part of the story a lot. And so now at this point, we're like probably at the point where you're about to head back into Montessori, yes? Or did you do that in between children?
Oh yeah. So in between children, so back to 2020, when my daughter was a year, I started working for Courtney's Montessori school. It was called Casa del Niños.
Okay.
But then in 2020, we all know what happened, the pandemic. So after 2 months, because the school starts in February here, then we had to shut down. Everything shut down. And then because Montessori education is so hands-on, we try to do some online support, but it really doesn't work out, because also in the Montessori philosophy, I mean, Maria Montessori says that our hands are the key to the brain. So it's very hands-on, and it just, I don't know, the parents they didn't want to be paying that money for them mainly doing it all themselves.
Well, and that's like unknown territory that we all just kind of headed into during that time. Like, how do we adapt? Is this adaptable? Is it not adaptable? How do we, get on the other side of this? And what does normal look for us right now? And then what will normal look like in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? And so I know in the States, like, they just shut traditional schools down too. Like, for a long time, there wasn't even the option of, teleschools or virtual schools. For a while, like, that was just mostly all of the women who were in the workforce had to, like, just go home and learn how to homeschool. Like, they didn't even know how to homeschool. Like, they're like, now I have to be a teacher. I was a mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's so interesting, the time that we lived through and how everybody's life kind of evolved during that time. So at what point was it in 2020 again that we got Montessori opened? Tell me how we got back to that, because I know that Courtney ended up going back to the States, right?
Yeah. So Courtney ended up going back to the States. And then the school ended up just dissolving and not working out. And so then another teacher at that school, Monica, she's from Spain, and she started having kids come to her house. And then, because just a few parents, they needed some help and everything. And then she had 9 kids. And so then she was like, okay, now I need some help and everything. And
these were still like 3 to 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then she asked me if I wanted to help her. And so I said, yeah, of course. Cause like I need some work and everything. So, so we got together and we ended up renting the same space that was Casa de Niños, but we remodeled it. And we decided we could fit 15 kids in that space. And so in January 2021, we opened the school. And
what is it called?
And we renamed it to Treble Montessori. So Treble is Spanish for clover.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Cool. So opened in January of 2021. Mm-hmm. And then that took off like a rocket.
Yeah. By March, we had a waiting list.
Holy cow.
So, yeah. So, and that was working really well. And then last year, so January 2023, that's when we decided to expand to elementary, because the kids were getting older, and a lot of the parents were like, well, I don't know where I want to put my kids.
Yeah. Now what?
Yeah. Because even though there are like lots of other schools, that they really loved our school, and we're the only Montessori school in the area. So, and I know that like families that are into Montessori, they stick to Montessori. Mm-hmm. So we decided to expand to elementary. And so we had another building built on the same property. And and now we have elementary, and we've had to hire some new teachers. And so we opened the elementary program and finished the building in January of 2023. And I had my son in February of 2023.
Wow. So you did all of that really heavy pregnant, like really, in the heat of in your 3rd trimester.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so then how long after Finn was born did you go back to teaching?
Well, I'm not really teaching right now. I'm just doing administrative work. Okay. Well, actually, I mean, this year I am teaching a little bit, because I am teaching the PE, physical education.
Oh, nice.
But I'm mainly doing administrative work.
Nice.
Because definitely having like other teachers and the 2 grades, there's a lot more administrative work to be doing. And that makes my hours like a little bit more flexible. It's not like I have to be at the school.
Right.
And I can do a lot of my work from home, which makes it easier.
So what was one of the hardest things that you didn't really expect moving to Costa Rica that you and Lowell and the family experienced, and you were like, wow, I thought I was prepared for everything, but this kind of caught me off guard?
Yeah. Actually, I had been thinking about this, and actually the car expenses. That is one thing that I did not really plan on, because I think in this area, like the weather kind of, and also the roads, though now there's a lot more paved roads, but especially like there's so many bumpy roads that it puts a lot of wear and tear on your cars. So that was one thing, is definitely planning for a bigger budget for cars, because it just needs to be done. And then another thing that goes along with that, and then also is patience, because everything here is slower. It's Pura Vida. So you have to have that Pura Vida attitude of, being patient. And sometimes these things come up.
It's funny because I know we've heard it a lot. And like, oh, my guy is supposed to come by and fix a refrigerator like at noon today. And you're like, you understand Tico time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's probably not going to be there today.
Yeah.
He'll let you know. He'll honk at the gate whenever it's time to let him in.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I first moved here, one of the moms in the kindergarten class, she was Tika, and she was like, I was saying like, oh yeah, there was something that needed to be fixed, and I was like, oh yeah, the man, he said he's going to be here mañana, and she's like, mañana here means
sometime.
It does not mean tomorrow.
It's the truth too. And like the earlier that you can own that in your heart, the less stress you'll have.
Yeah.
Because they don't work on the crazy chaos clock that we work on, I think about like in the States, so like the cable guy says, I'm going to come between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Please be home. Right. And to us, we're like, are you crazy? You can't even like give me an hour you're going to be here.
Yeah.
He's giving us a window in a day. And I think about that. And if you could take that times 10, that's what it's like waiting for service in Costa Rica of whatever. I mean, because, a lot of times it has nothing to do with it. Like they may have been driving and a tree fell over on the road on the way to where they were going. And instead of taking their little motorcycle and going around it, they stopped, helped them drag it off, helped them cut the wood off, put the stuff out of the way. They just did the thing to help their neighbors, whatever. And then they're like, oh, well, I can go help this person and be later. I can just be on time to this. I'm like, there's just so many variables. And it's like, we just have to sit back and go, what can I do to survive if it takes 3 days for this person to come and fix my refrigerator? Well, I'm probably going to go down to the store and buy some ice, make sure my ice chests are loaded up, do this thing, XYZ, whatever it is. And so as long as you can go, what is plan B and C before they get here? Because they're not going to be here today. If they are, it's a miracle. And you need to blast them on social media, let everybody know who they are, because those people, and they're not lazy. They're not anything. I mean, they're probably some of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life.
For sure.
Their time concept is just different than ours is. And adapting to that is 100 thing. And so then now that we've stated that, what is one of the things that you were so pleasantly surprised by? You're like, I didn't expect this to be that wonderful.
Well, let's see. I feel like there's a lot of things, but one thing, I think the thing that stuck out the most for me and why I love Costa Rica so much is the community.
Oh, yes.
For sure. Community. Like, I think that the Costa Rican people are really nice. They're so patient, like with like, especially with like learning language, and like even if you don't speak Spanish, and they will be patient. They understand that you're practicing. And even if they speak English, like if they know you're practicing and trying, they will be patient and like let you speak instead of being like, oh, let's just switch to English because it's easier. Like
I went down to Paso Canoas one time. We were going to go down, do some shopping, do whatever, and we stopped at this restaurant. And I'd been so good, like I knew what I wanted to order before I got there, and I was so prepared to order it in Spanish. And this beautiful young girl, she was probably 15, 16 years old, waiting on us, like these huge eyes. She was absolutely gorgeous, and she comes up, and in Spanish, I give my order, and she does this. Like she has no idea what I've just said.
Yeah.
Then I repeat it again. And I'm like, maybe if I change some of my phrasing, maybe I don't have like the right accent on it. So like do it a third time. And she finally, like her eyes are just big. She's just staring at me like I've just spoken Japanese. And so she finally goes over and gets somebody else to come over. And I'm like, so I said the same thing. And he was like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like he understood. Like, I don't even know how we had that. And she was so worried that like she wasn't getting it right. And it was hysterical. I mean, the first time the first time I ever went down to Costa Rica, like I've always loved rum. And so I normally would drink Bacardi when I go down. And so we'd gone to some bar, and I think we were over on the Nicoya Peninsula. We were over there and over in Guanacaste, and I had ordered a Bacardi and Coke. And I'm like, I would like a Bacardi and Coke. And I mean, both of those two words should translate pretty easily. And they're like, what? So again, I'm like, Bacardi and Coke, Bacardi and Cola. I'm like, just keep going through all of the words, trying to like get this. And I could see the bottle in the bar, so I know they have it. And I'm like, well, I just walk him over and I show it to him. He goes, Bacardi. And I'm like, yes, Bacardi. Then I discovered Florida Cana, and then I did never order Bacardi any longer.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Well, Jenni, I appreciate, because I feel the same way about Costa Rica. I think the people and the communities are the thing that makes me love it the most. I've traveled a lot as well, and I have never felt more welcome. The minute I get off the plane, every time I come to Costa Rica, it's just like, oh, yes, I'm home. Like I just feel like that, and I don't ever. A lot of times I travel down there, and I travel by myself. Like I may fly into San Jose. Pop on a Sansa flight over to Capos, catch the bus into Vida, grab Grebens at the taxi, and he takes me 4-wheel drive up to wherever I'm going. And I've got my backpack, and that's it. And I've never been worried about traveling alone into Costa Rica ever. Like there's never been a time when I was like, oh, this feels sketchy to me. Not one time ever have I ever felt unsafe or manipulated or like I was dealing with a shyster of any, I mean, never at all. And so I love that. And I'm sure they're there. I mean, you can get on the message boards or on any of the Facebook groups, and people are there to tell you they're going to rip you off. This is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But I've never had it happen to me. And so I've never felt unsafe. I've never been robbed. I've never had any of those things happen. I'm always very careful anyways, just in case. I'm not saying someone be carefree about this, but I'm just saying like it's never happened to me. And I love the feeling that I have when I'm there, the feeling of peace and of community, like you stated. So if any of you are out there considering relocating to Costa Rica and becoming one of our expat neighbors, we're excited to give you as much information as we have and the experiences that we have had, and welcome you to a country that isn't like, you're not moving here to save a ton of money like you will on some things, and other things are going to cost you, and it'll all balance out. You're coming here for a different quality of life. So with that said, I appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. I know you went super personal with your birth stories and all of that. I'm just so happy to be able to share your story, and I can't wait to actually meet you in person.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet you in person too.
If you guys,
thank you for having me on.
Any questions, I'm going to drop, if there's a link to the Montessori school, I'm going to drop it down below so people can get more information on that too as well.
Okay, great. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Jenni.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too.